Okay, this is screencast number 11, and it should be the last one for Unit 8, Lesson 5. We're talking about tropical cyclone hazards this time, and so I'm just going to go with you on this particular page, and then we'll stop and talk about it. Here, beginning around the 1st of June, the Gulf of Mexico, and East Coast states are at great risk for tropical cyclones. In our case, that would be tropical storms and hurricanes. While most people know that tropical cyclones can contain damaging wind, many do not realize that they also produce several other hazards, both directly and indirectly. And the first of those hazards that we're going to talk about is storm surge. Storm surge is simply water that is pushed toward the shore by forces of wind swirling around the storm. So they're just going to be brought in with the hurricane. This advancing surge of water combines with normal tides to create the hurricane storm tide, which can increase the average water level 15 feet or more, depending on the storm. Okay. I want to stop and, well, before I stop, actually, let's look at this picture. It's kind of hard to tell even on my color copy, but this green line here says sea level. You might have water levels up to this point, which is normal high tide, maybe a little lower if it's normal low tide. Okay, so let's say that we have a storm roll in during the time where we would normally have high tide. So a hurricane comes in during high tide. Well, you have 2 feet because of the high tide, plus let's say you have a storm surge of 15 feet. That is a total storm tide of 17 feet, which is going to be enough to flood a whole lot of low-lying areas. Okay, I'm going to show you some pictures and some images from Hurricane Ike, which struck the Texas Gulf Coast in 2008. Okay. All right, here we have an image. Obviously, it's labeled Hurricane Ike inundation depth. Inundation basically means the depth to which an area is flooded with water. Okay. If you notice, this right here is the upper Texas coast. This is Galveston Bay. Okay. This is the Sabine River. Okay, so this is the border between Louisiana, which is over here, and Texas, which is over here. Okay, right here, this long, slim island, this is Galveston Island. Okay, the city of Galveston is on this northeast portion of Galveston Island. Okay, and a lot of people, there's some confusion about Galveston. Well, this is Galveston Island. The city of Galveston sits on Galveston Island, and all of this area, including the island, is Galveston County. So it's all named Galveston, and that's sort of what tends to confuse some people. But anyway, this is the Gulf of Mexico out here, and this is the path of Hurricane Ike in 2008. Okay, if you notice, the center of the storm came right over the northeast end of Galveston Island. Okay, and you notice these reds, orange, greens, blues, and purples. If you will look over here, we can take a look. I know it's a little bit hard to read because it's kind of small, but for instance, if it's that pale yellow kind of straw color up here, then that means no inundation at all. It's not flooded. Kind of light purple, lavender, flooded but with less than 2 feet of water. Blue is 2 to 4 feet of water. Green is that area of land is under 4 to 6 feet of water, 6 to 8 feet of water, 8 to 10 feet of water, and the red, these are areas that were covered, flooded with 10 feet of water or more. So they were inundated with water, meaning that they were underwater by at least 10 feet. Okay, now you may be wondering, if the path of the storm goes over Galveston, why wasn't Galveston the worst hit? Well, if you remember, a hurricane A hurricane turns counterclockwise in the northern hemisphere. We're in the northern hemisphere. So the rain bands that are coming in off of the Gulf of Mexico that are hitting land, they're coming in from this way because the whole system is spinning counterclockwise. So these rain bands are really bringing in a lot of rain, and the storm surge associated with this side of the hurricane is going to be much greater. Okay, so that's why we have so much more inundation over here on this side of the storm than we do over here. Okay, it also depends on topography of the land and other things, but typically the right-hand side of a storm, for storms in the northern hemisphere, are going to get hit worse. Okay. All right, but you still see on Galveston Island there are a lot of places that are flooded and under many, many feet of water. Okay. Storm surge does typically cause some of the most damaging winds, yes, are a problem, but storm surge can literally put entire areas under several feet of water. Okay. This image right here is downtown Houston. Okay, and it's flooded. There are low-lying areas that were inundated because of the storm surge. Okay. This is an image from Galveston Island, and you can see the streets are invisible. They are underwater. Okay. You can see sort of where the streets were because you can see some of the trees and you can see some of the electricity poles and things like that, but we're under several feet of water. Okay. Another image, same thing. You can see the telephone poles, you can see where the streets should be, but they're all underwater. Okay, another image. Got a cemetery that's underwater. If you've ever been to Galveston on I-45, you know that there's this kind of a hump in that bridge that goes across from mainland Texas onto Galveston Island, and that's what this is, but most of it's underwater right now because of the storm surge. And then we have one final image down here. Again, this is on 45 going down towards the Galveston area, and you have just debris and whatnot everywhere brought in by the hurricane. Storm surge comes in. It's not like a tsunami that happens all of a sudden. A storm surge will come in and the water will gradually increase in level over many, many hours. But it can increase as much as 15 or 20 feet in a really bad storm. So it's a major problem associated with hurricanes. All right, another hurricane hazard that we need to discuss are winds and squalls. Okay. Hurricanes typically are known for their damaging wind, and they're actually rated by their wind strength. We've talked about the Saffir-Simpson wind scale. However, when the National Weather Service's National Hurricane Center issues a statement concerning the wind and the category, that value is for sustained winds only, and there can actually be gusts of winds that exceed the sustained wind values. Okay? So if you go back to, for instance, your Saffir-Simpson wind scale, let's say you have a Category 4 storm, your sustained winds, the winds that are pretty much blowing all the time, are blowing at this speed. Okay? But you can have gusts of wind that exceed that amount. Okay? Gusts are short but rapid bursts in wind speed and are primarily caused by turbulence over land mixing faster air aloft to the surfaces. Squalls, on the other hand, are longer periods of increased wind speeds and are generally associated with the bands of thunderstorms which make up the spiral bands around the hurricane. All right. Wind from a tropical cyclone damages and destroys structures two ways. First, many homes are damaged or destroyed when high wind simply lifts the roof off of the dwellings, because typically it means that there's a pressure imbalance between what's inside the dwelling and what's outside. Okay, so the higher pressure, for instance, in the attic helps to basically push the roof off, and once it's lifted, the roof acts like a sail and is blown clear. And once the roof is gone, the walls are much easier to be blown down because you've not got that stabilizing structure in the roof anymore. Okay. The second way that wind destroys buildings can also be a result of the roof becoming airborne. The wind picks up debris and sends that debris hurling at other things. Okay. So it's not just the wind, it's now what the wind has picked up and is flinging everywhere. Okay. If you notice up here, again, you guys have a black and white copy, I know, but this shows a piece of plywood that has been impaled, or actually a palm tree, it looks like a palm tree, impaled by a piece of flying debris, and it's a sheet of plywood. Okay. Right. Another problem with hurricanes is inland flooding. So in addition to storm surge, remember we're bringing in a lot of water just from storm surge, we've got high winds, but also tropical cyclones threaten with their torrential rains and their flooding. So if you get torrential rains, you get rain, you're going to have flooding anyway, never mind if you have a storm surge. Okay? Because you're having just thunderstorm after thunderstorm after thunderstorm. Okay? All right, since 1970, nearly 60% of the 600 deaths due to floods associated with tropical cyclones occurred inland from the storm's landfall. Of that 60%, almost one-fourth of the United States tropical cyclone deaths occur to people who drown in or attempt to abandon their cars. This is that whole thing that goes back to you turn around and you don't drown. Okay, so you do not want to drive through water that is high, because we've talked about the power of water. If 1 gallon of water is over 8 pounds and you've got water even moving just 10 to 20 miles an hour and you have a couple of feet of water, that is a huge amount of force that's able to work on something. So you just don't want to even mess with that. Okay. In fact, more people are killed by floods than any other weather-related cause. Most of these fatalities occur because people underestimate the power of moving water, and they purposely walk or drive into flooding conditions. Okay. A weak, slow-moving tropical storm can cause more damage due to flooding than more powerful, fast-moving hurricanes. So that's another thing. It's, no two hurricanes are going to be alike. Okay. All right. Last thing we're going to talk about is tornadoes. And we're going to talk again about tornadoes just simply because it is something that is something that can potentially form in a hurricane, just simply because they are associated with very, very, very strong thunderstorms, which we're going to get a lot of in a hurricane. Okay. Tornadoes are thought to be responsible for a lot of the uneven damage seen in a hurricane's aftermath. Okay. Some tropical cyclones produce no tornadoes, while others will produce multiple tornadoes. But in general, tornadoes associated with hurricanes are less intense on the whole than those that occur, in the Great Plains area in that tornado alley pathway. Okay. But once again, you've got a wide variety of issues that are associated with hurricanes. You've got storm surge, high winds, lots of rain, possible tornadoes, flooding, etc.